Hi, my name is Chris Bennett, and I'm here today with Colonel Russ Barber, and we're working together on a project to document the research over the past 100 years on what is the impact of stress on physical and mental health, and how can that impact be ameliorated by applying perhaps spiritual values, spiritual understanding of life, mutual support, positive emotions, and potentially to drastically reduce the cost of health care in America. I've been working on this type of research for the past 19 years and have, beginning with my volunteer work in 1983 at the Palos Verdes Community Helpline. In the past 4 years, I have come across more of the important information on how stress affects our health, both mentally and physically. And I happened to, 2 years ago, meet Colonel Barber, who enlightened and opened many new doors for me. His background is perhaps 60 years in the field of religion as a Christian minister and teacher, traveling all around the world to help children and people to eliminate and reduce their suffering. I guess the best thing that speaks for Colonel Barber is this award right here, the Golden Heart Humanitarian Award, for his lifetime dedication to the service of others, for his valor in saving lives in times of war or peace, for his continuous unrelenting effort and personal sacrifice in helping the needy, the hungry, and those who are starving, for spiritual uplift, his tireless support for many humanitarian and charitable causes all around the world, his purity in the exercise of his ministry, and his ever-glowing golden heart. Presented by the Crown Golden Eagles. Good to have you here, Mr. Barber.
Thank
Colonel
you.
Barber. So the thing that prompted me to call together this meeting with Colonel Barber is that a few days ago I read in the Los Angeles Times that currently the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors is preparing their presentation to the federal government on why it's very important for the funding for health care in the United States to remain stable and perhaps even be increased. Currently, our federal government, we all know, is in a budget crunch, and they're reasonably looking for cuts in different areas. And so I saw that all of my research from the last few years could be useful for that whole discussion, and so we're here today to talk about those issues. In the past 4 years, I've collected several dozen of the books on how stress affects our health, and so I brought those today, and we're going to briefly go through each one of them and discuss some of the points. Over time, over the next year, I'll be preparing this material in a more a better format, probably in a video presentation, multimedia. But right now we're just going to go through each one, and hopefully we can bring some information to the discussion on healthcare in Los Angeles, which can be useful. Now, Colonel Barber and I have been working for a couple years on I guess our primary focus of our work and my research is to accumulate the material which powerfully argues for and could convince anyone that it's in all of our best interest to do an effective job with healthcare. And all of my material also is very supportive of two other initiatives in the White House right now. One is the faith-based initiative. So we'll be talking a little bit about how this material will provide evidence for why that initiative will be good for America, for healthcare. It'll reduce healthcare costs. And the second initiative is the school voucher program. That will also have a beneficial effect for healthcare. Some of the material that we'll be discussing is from two of our greatest spiritual and intellectual leaders for many years, Reverend Billy Graham and Reverend Robert Schuller, who Colonel Barber introduced me to about a year and a half ago, and then I spent that time buying about a dozen of their books and reading them. You worked with them in the past, correct?
Right.
Many times, over
Many times, yeah.
decades.
Yeah, right. Billy Graham over 50 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Bob Schuller over 40 years.
Great. All the material I've been collecting is from very well-credentialed doctors and psychiatrists, from most of them from our best universities around the country. Harvard, let's see, Stanford, Yale. And in addition to this material, in our final presentation, which we'll be preparing over the next year, I have accumulated at least 100 supporting studies which have also come from the best universities around the country and around the world. I guess the best place to start is with one of my favorite sets of books, and that is, in my research I found that there has been a split between science and religion for over 100 years, and that seems to be what we'll be focusing on in this presentation. Is that my research is indicating that if we continue funding healthcare at current levels and actually increase it temporarily, and then create some other initiatives that will start to reduce our healthcare costs. And I'll be explaining how the faith-based initiative and the school voucher program will actually accomplish a reduction over many years, maybe 5 to 10 years. It'll result in a reduction in overall health costs. So one of the great books that I found that supports this idea is called A History of Warfare of Science with Theology in Christendom. It's by Andrew D. White, and he was the late president and professor of history at Cornell University, graduated from Yale and Columbia. And this book was written in 1896, and it is all about the split between religion and science, including medicine. There has been a split which has made it difficult for these two groups of people that both are working on improving people's lives and eliminating or diminishing their suffering. And the split has prevented those groups from working together, and there are assets and abilities and resources in the religious community that can benefit the medical community, and vice versa. One of the big shockers in the last 2 years for me was that after I met Colonel Barber and he introduced me to Billy Graham, here's one of the ideas that I found in Billy Graham's book, which has led to seeing a new way that we can have some great improvements in our health system. So here is in 1953, Billy Graham said the following: "We have seen that the most terrible, the most devastating fact on the universe is sin, the cause of all trouble, the root of all sorrow. The dread of every man lies in this one small word, sin. It has reversed the nature of man. It has destroyed the inner harmony of man's life. It has robbed him of his nobility. It has caused man to be caught in the devil's trap. All mental disorders, all sicknesses, all destruction, all wars find their root in sin. It causes madness in the brain and poison in the heart." Pretty great.
Agreed. Agreed, absolutely, yeah.
So today we'll actually be showing how our great leader, Billy Graham, actually had a powerful insight with that last statement, which now, over 50 years of research at our top universities, the experts are coming to the same conclusion, that sin causes mental and physical problems, health problems. Mental symptoms, it causes depressions, and some people might be critical of that last passage from Billy Graham because there's sort of because of this split between science and religion, some of the science people, they tend to attack the religious people who believe that they have something to offer on these issues. So what we're really excited about is bringing together all of this information and this proof that what Billy Graham has been saying for many years is true. Now, let me share one little thing. Colonel Barber is Christian and has been for most of his life.
Right.
I have
80 years.
80 years. Yes. So he's the expert on Christianity. My background is that my mother was Christian, or is Christian, and we went to church a little when I was a child, but ever since then, until I met Colonel Barber, I was completely alienated and cut off from the value in the Christian philosophy. I had never picked up a Bible. I had never really in depth listened to Robert Schuller or Billy Graham. It was really just a great void in my life, and it really came as quite a shock, actually, that I could live 35 years and actually almost nobody ever told me anything. Colonel Barber was the first person who really shared with me this information and that there could be some value in it. The only people that ever shared with me about the Christianity in the Bible were the Jehovah's Witnesses, who came around and knocked on my door a couple times. And I always listened respectfully, but I've sort of been in a quandary as to why the people that I've met who were Christian, who I found out later that they were Christian, they didn't say anything. It was like they were scared silent. So I'm actually really excited about exploring together what is the value of religion in our life. Does it go beyond a fun Sunday once a week? Does it go beyond the value of praying together? Is there some value that religion can help to solve some of our problems in this world that are really causing a lot of frustration and trouble for us? So here's another passage from Billy Graham which sort of will help to clarify the last passage I read from him. So let's look exactly at what is sin. This is from A World of Flame, and it was published in 1965. So the definition of sin here is the Bible teaches that man is a sinner. What is sin? The Westminster Confession defines it as any want of conformity to or transgression of the law of God. To put it simply, sin is anything contrary to the will of and law of God. So now, where do we find, Colonel Barber, where do we find the law of God?
In the Bible.
Okay.
In the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation.
Now,
and there's actually no conflict between true science and true religion.
Great. Okay, that's what I've found in my research, is that they actually work together very well.
Wonderful, right.
So, after Colonel Barber gave me this Bible, for some reason I had an impulse to read, and I practically read the entire New Testament. I haven't gotten to the Old Testament yet, and I'm pretty excited about getting to that next, but I did read most of the New Testament. And I wanted to make the point about myself not being a Christian because, although I may be someday, right now I'm just in the exploratory phase, but I wanted to share that so that I could make it clear that I'm not looking at the Bible or the books of Billy Graham and Robert Schuller from a belief perspective. I'm looking at it from a practical, scientific, logical perspective. And I think that's important because it seems like sometimes religious people get accused of or are viewed as just having beliefs, like a belief that the Bible or the religion can cure disease. And so what we're working together on is actually bringing that together with the scientific proof for that kind of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just to read a little bit here from, it's a little bit more from A World of Flame. It says, every newspaper or magazine that we pick up contains evidence of man's disease. Hate, lust, greed, prejudice, manifesting themselves in 1,000 ways every day. The very fact that we have policemen, jails, and military forces is an indication that something is radically wrong. Man is actually a paradox. On the one side there is futility, degradation, and sin. On the other side there is goodness, kindness, gentleness, and love. So that's a critical idea, because what we want to do here today is examine the flip side of sin. And so if we're saying that sin is poison and it causes physical and mental ill health, then on the flip side we're saying that the opposite of sin is curative and can cure physical ill health and physical and mental ill health.
Mm-hmm.
So has that been your belief and understanding?
That's been my belief as a minister for 70 years and as a chaplain for over 60 years.
And you've been sort of sharing that idea with people?
With everybody that I can, yeah, all over the world.
Great, all right.
Yeah.
Now, let's pull out one of Colonel Barber's cards, and it's a perfect example of that he's been working on this. So here we look at one of Colonel Barber's cards, and this has been his mission for many years. And it says, love, hope, food, water, health, shelter, education, peace, security, freedom for the world. So Colonel Barber has expressed to me and has been arguing that all we need are these items on this list, and we will cure much of our disease, much of our mental symptoms, much of our depressions, and many of our ill health problems. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So we looked at, Billy Graham talks about our problems in terms of we have sin on the one hand and we have love on the other hand. So let's start with some of the material that I found which talks about how those ideas are connected to our physical and mental health. So the first one I'll pull out is called The Stress of Life, and it was written by Hans Selye, MD.
Wonderful guy.
You've heard of him?
Oh yeah.
Great, all right.
Absolutely fantastic.
He is a super genius. He was one of the founders of the concept of stress, in that he did a tremendous amount of research on both animals and humans as to how stress affects our health. And this was published in 1956 and in 1976. And what he found is that when we experience any kind of stress, it has several effects on our body. The first thing is it causes the release of hormones, which are called stress chemicals. The three primary ones that I've learned about are adrenaline, corticosteroids, which is a steroid which is like corticosteroids, and endogenous opioids. All three of these chemicals, the research has found, have a tremendous impact on every system in our body.
Mm-hmm.
It flows through, and it goes everywhere. It goes through our bloodstream. It goes into every cell in our body, and it can actually change the brain and change the body and cause ill health. So this is what he found out. So here, this is from many years ago. The evidence started to accumulate that proves what Billy Graham has been saying. So this material would argue that if we want to improve our health, what we need to do is reduce our stress really in the entire population.
Get right with God.
Get right with God. Get right with God.
That's right.
See, I think that's a pretty powerful statement.
That's
because if we look in the Bible, what we find is that, I think what you mean is that we have to get right with what it says in the Bible.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So what I found in the Bible is that there are what psychologists call them scripts for living.
Mm-hmm.
We all live by scripts every day. An example was cited of when we walk into a restaurant, we have a script of what we're going to do. We look around the restaurant and see how full it is to determine if it has good food. We talk to somebody and see if they're somebody we like. Do we want to eat at this restaurant because we like the people? We ask for a menu. We say how many people are in our party. So we follow this script. We look around to see if the place is clean. So we follow these scripts for living. And one of the reasons why I've been so excited about the Bible is because it provides scripts for living that result in peace, harmony, positive, supportive relationships.
All right.
The Bible suggests that we forgive, and we get along and we work together, and we seek the truth. So it's really a powerful set of scripts for living which can, over time, result in better mental and physical health. Is that your understanding?
Right, I understand perfectly.
Great.
Yeah. I've been preaching that for over 60 years. 70 years now.
All right.
And that's what I've taken into my ministry as a chaplain with the military people all over the world during 3 wars, and now at the request of Washington, the 4th war.
Awesome. Well, we certainly need more people that are devoting 100% of their life and their energy to that, improving humanity and helping people. So I've been pretty excited about this new material because I can see that the Bible has a lot of potential for, it actually for sure has already created a lot of healing in the world, but it seems to have a lot of potential for creating much more healing if it's properly applied and we recognize the value that's there. Now, Jesus spent his life healing, isn't that correct?
Right, yeah.
So, and then now my interpretation of the Bible now is that Jesus came to share with us the information that we needed to hear about how we could heal each other. So the next book is called Heartbreak and Heart Disease. It's by Stephen T. Sinatra, who is from one of our top universities. He's from the New England Center in Massachusetts, Connecticut, the American College of Cardiology, assistant clinical professor of medicine at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. And the entire book, I'll just sort of summarize it, and for most of these books I'll be sort of summarizing them. In our presentation that we're putting together, it's going to be a more in-depth exploration of these books. But this entire book is about how heartbreak leads to heart disease, which is in the top 10 killers of Americans. So now, when we are talking about the potential value of the scripts which are in the Bible, the value in improving our mental and physical health, here's an example. This is Matthew 5. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. That's a very simple idea, and so it's easy to step over it and ignore the huge amount of power that is in that idea. So here's one example of how that idea can have a great impact on health. This is from Control Your High Blood Pressure Without Drugs by Dr. Cleves M. Bennett, MD. It was written in 1985, and it was reviewed by perhaps a dozen of the top experts in the field of mental and physical health. Dr. Farquhar Har, MD, professor of medicine at Stanford Heart Disease, had some very positive comments. Alvin Poussant, MD, at Harvard Medical School, reviewed it. He actually worked with Dr. Bennett at UCLA probably 30 or 40 years ago. Richard Glassick, MD, professor and chairman, Department of Medicine, Harvard UCLA Medical Center, and Norman Cousins, among various others. So I want to mention that because the people that we're going to be talking about in
I knew Norman Cousins.
This presentation, you did know Norman Cousins.
Yeah.
That guy was a genius.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, yeah. Fantastic.
Just to say a little bit about him, his major contribution to the world was he became very, very sick, and the doctors were doing all kinds of tests and throwing expensive medicines and procedures at him to try to cure it, and they weren't doing so well. They do in other cases. I definitely don't want to criticize the medical establishment because for the most part they are geniuses who have done a lot to improve our health. But what he decided was that he was going to explore the role of positive emotions and the reduction of negative emotions in improving his health. And so he was actually able to cure his condition, and it was completely documented by doctors, I believe, at UCLA, and they were so impressed that they gave him an honorary medical degree, and he actually became a teacher at UCLA, which is pretty unusual for a person of his background. He was a writer, and he was in the field of the media. So I'll read a little bit here from Dr. Bennett. Dr. Bennett I know a lot about him because he happens to be my father, and his background is pretty impressive. He got his medical degree at UCLA and ended up many years later being a professor of medicine there, and he was part of the Veterans Administration. He was a doctor there at Duke University at the VA Medical Center, and he was also at Albert Einstein University, and so he has a extensive, very impressive set of credentials. And so he's sort of an unusual doctor in that he readily pulls from all the resources that are available to him to cure and improve people's health. He doesn't really exclude the possible contribution of religion, philosophy, and he talks about it a lot in his book here. And this is all about how to control high blood pressure without drugs by exercise, positive emotions, stress reduction, working together with people. He recommends going to your family and asking them for support, which is a powerful idea that's talked about throughout the Bible. Isn't that correct?
Right.
We ought to help each other and help each other to become healthy. So here's the passage here which will illuminate how the potential value of applying the material in the Bible to improve our health. One of the real problems with stress is that the emergency nervous system isn't turned on only when there's something right there threatening your peace and security of your life. It can also be turned on just by thinking about unpleasant things. We can sit there in the office and think about a lot of little things and get all steamed up. When you think about things ahead of time and imagine ways in which they might not work out for the best, that's worry. And when you think about things after they've happened and emphasize the way in which they didn't work out the way you wanted, that's regret or resentment. Regret is telling yourself how you messed up, and resentment puts the blame on other people. They're equally damaging. Your ability to worry, regret, and resent can turn on the emergency nervous system and get your body ready for fight or run when there's nothing you can do about it at the time, because whatever it is you're worrying or feeling resentful about or regretting happened a week ago or isn't going to happen until next week. Now, I think that's pretty critical because the Bible has a lot to say about regret and resentments and clearing those up. But we'll get to that in a moment. So, Dr. Bennett has a great passage in here where he talks about one of his patients where he applied this idea of forgiveness and making peace with people. I realized that in week 12 I should discuss one of the most powerful stress reduction techniques of all, forgiveness. In a way, I suppose I've been saving the best for last. And I say the best because forgiveness is both a beautiful and a very powerful technique. When I talk about forgiveness, I'm talking about giving again, giving anew, your love and your affection to someone you've been angry or disappointed with, even if the resentment has been around a long time. And it's not the kind of thing that depends on whether the person deserves it or not. That shouldn't even be an issue. So now he talks about one of his patients who was dealing with an issue of forgiveness and a resentment, and here's what he says. Otis was lying in the coronary care unit, a little drugged up and dopey, his blood pressure coming down from about 240 over 150. He must have been wondering what had happened to him. One minute he was at home, the next in an ambulance with sirens screaming, and now here he was in the hospital before he could say Blue Cross Blue Shield. He told me he'd gotten upset with his son-in-law over something, and then, next thing he knew, his chest was hurting real bad. His head ached, and someone called the paramedics. It turned out that he hadn't spoken to his son-in-law for 2.5 years. There'd been a little misunderstanding, then another and another, and now there was a wall of silence between them. Impenetrable. And at 61, when you haven't spoken to your son-in-law in 2 years, you're probably not going to be too keen about changing your mind. But you never can tell, and a lot was at stake. Otis was a Catholic, so I told him to talk to his priest about it. I figured priests are pretty knowledgeable about forgiveness. And that was my prescription. See your priest and learn to forgive your son-in-law. Never mind what the SOB deserves. You deserve it, I said. Oh, I gave him some medicines too, but I knew they wouldn't have much of an effect if this business with his son-in-law was still eating away at him. Mm-hmm. Well, I saw Otis 4 weeks later, standing up on the treadmill, ready to start our cardiac rehabilitation program. He deadpanned beautifully, but I could sense his excitement. How are things at home? I asked. He let a little smile through. It turned out he'd seen his priest, he was talking to his son-in-law again, he'd mended some of the fences, he felt better, and his blood pressure was down quite a bit. Of course it was. When you unclench your fist, you can relax. And that's what happened to Otis for the first time in 2.5 years. He told me he was going around now to all the other people he'd held grudges against and cleaning things up. And he was pretty happy about it too, I can tell you. And that's what makes my day brighter, hearing a story like that and knowing that someone has turned his life around.
Wonderful. Fantastic. That's Christianity in practice. Biblical practice.
Well, I have you to thank.
Religion in practice.
I have you to thank for sharing me with this, because I had been working on, I'm helping my father to update this book for republication, and I had been working on it, and I never would have understood the importance of this passage. And so it seems to me that the critical opportunity here is that with President Bush's very powerful faith-based initiative, which is now under the Department of Health, mm-hmm. We have the potential to explore these possible connections and reduce our health spending.
Right.
In this instance right here, Otis was able to reduce his blood pressure, by reducing his stress, which, by the way, stress automatically raises the blood pressure. So anybody who has hypertension, is what Dr. Bennett says in here, always has some critical, unnecessary stress in their life. Mm-hmm. So in this instance, by prescribing forgiveness to reduce stress, to improve hypertension, Dr. Bennett was circumventing more expensive procedures and treatments, and with time and more forgiveness, and also reducing salt, exercising, improving the diet, then there was a potential here of coming completely off the medication and curing the hypertension, avoiding future strokes and heart attacks, which are can potentially happen when somebody has high blood pressure, and all the other systems that break down in the body from hypertension, and saving somebody's life, extending it, keeping families together. When somebody dies early, it has a huge impact on the family. It creates stress for them, which can have a bad effect on their health. And so this is just a great example. Now let me turn to the affirmations now. There are other methods you can use to quiet the whirring voices in your mind, and using affirmations is one of them. Affirmations are positive phrases that you hear or repeat to yourself over and over again. I am wonderful, I am strong, or I am beautiful, or I'm going to be successful. That kind of thing. And affirmations have a profound positive healing effect on the body. Don't take my word for it, try it and see. See how you feel the next time someone is critical of you or you're critical of yourself. And then see how you feel when someone compliments you or acknowledges yourself, pats yourself on the back, that kind of thing. It's an easy choice, isn't it? Don't you think self-criticism helps you accomplish anything? Excuse me. Do you think self-criticism helps you accomplish anything? Nonsense. You've got lots and lots to learn, and you need encouragement, not criticism, to help you learn it. So now, what could you say?
Fantastic.
That's pretty great, huh?
That's pretty great, yeah, right, yeah.
So now, what can you tell us about how that type of approach in relationships is detailed in the Bible?
Well, that's the principles you find all through the Bible, see. And that's what we use as we proclaim the message of God and Christ to the people of the world through the church, the faith-based organizations that the President's talking about, see. And that people can overcome their health problems by getting right with God and going to church and listening to the Bible and listening to the preacher preach and the priest proclaim his message and the rabbi proclaiming his message, and all comes from the Bible, see. And it was as I introduced you to the Bible that enabled you now to begin this search, this study that is culminating in what we're doing right now today. See?
Exactly.
Right. You had never read the Bible till we met.
Yeah, that's true. And all I can say to that is I was robbed. I went to school. I graduated from high school. I didn't graduate from college. But probably if I had understood the Bible throughout school, maybe if I learned about it in school, then I am sure that I would have graduated from college, because my main impediment in college was a tremendous amount of stress, which some of the symptoms of stress are difficulty concentrating, difficulty focusing, difficulty with memory. All of those things make it very difficult to be successful in school. So,
what a blessing it is when a family goes to church and the children go to Sunday school or Christian Endeavor or youth meetings and learns to live by the Bible and the great stories of the Bible and the stories of Christ and his healing power. See, he came as a savior of the world and was able to wipe sin away out of our life, see. But everything that he says and does is so practical, bringing health and happiness and peace and life and relief from stress. So,
well, that is a very excellent point, and just to expand upon that,
love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The golden rule, see.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So the do unto others, those are some examples of scripts.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Scripts to live by, and it actually I can recall one of the key passages in the Bible is, if my people will turn from their wicked ways and seek my face,
right,
I will heal their land.
I'll heal the land right here, which means healing their bodies.
Yeah.
When you heal the land, they get good food and good clean water and better health and so on.
So that would tell me that in this example, Dr. Bennett is actually aiding the patient.
That's right.
To seek out the face of God.
That's right, yeah.
And as a result, Otis, in this example, became healed.
That's right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. He forgave, no longer resented, no longer, he didn't let those past things destroy his life, which it was doing, see. Brought on the heart attack. So,
great, okay.
Great, yeah, right.
Now, so it seems to me that the potential of the President Bush's faith-based initiative is to potentially reconnect science with the value of religion.
That's right, absolutely, yeah. Get people back to God.
Okay, and now the potential savings on national health care, according to the studies that I've read, are the studies on how stress affects health suggest that between 50 and 70% of people's symptoms that they go to the doctor to be treated are caused by stress.
Right.
Have you heard that before?
That's right. Sure have. Right here.
Yeah.
Stress and resentment. Yeah. And hatred. Because the ultimate is hatred, like the terrorists. They hate America, you know. They hate the Jews, see. And that caused them to do the terrible things that they've done, see, and are doing, see. So the Bible is the most practical book in the world.
Yeah, and now this brings up another good point that I'd like to bring up, which is that it was pretty astonishing to me to find that a over 2,000-year-old book has so much value in it.
Yeah, right.
And
the eternal laws of life, which is the laws of health too.
Now, I think it would be important here to make the point that from my perspective as a non-Christian, I look at the Bible as not really a Christian document. I look at the Bible as, number one, historical document.
It's that too.
Historical. And I also look at it as that Christians have brought the Bible to us,
right,
but they don't necessarily own it. The Bible is all of humanity.
Right. It belongs to everybody. Right. Everybody in the world. All 6 billion of them.
So when we're considering and looking for what is the value there, I don't think we should say this is Christian, therefore all Jewish people and all Muslims have to ignore it.
Everybody in the world, all 6 billion of them.
So, for example, love your neighbor as yourself.
Fits everywhere.
Anybody can use that, right?
Right, sure. Everybody can use that.
Okay. But there's been this big split between science and religion where they can't really figure out and consider how these religion can work together with science.
The Bible is the most scientific book in the world. See? And everybody in the world has got to have food and clean water. You can live 2 months without some food, but you can only live 7 days without water. And if you have water, food and water, and exercise,
positive emotions,
you're going to have better health. See?
Okay.
You're going to overcome disease and stress. And just follow that book, you see. Yeah. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to I'm just going to briefly go through several of these other books. See, I've been collecting all of the evidence. There's actually a huge amount of evidence. I've been doing my research at the UCLA Medical Library mostly, and copying hundreds of studies which show and have found and actually analyzed using the scientific process to and consensus between the different universities. This isn't just, you know, some minor person who came up with these ideas, and but there's actually a consensus between our greatest universities and doctors about these facts. So here's one of the greatest books that I've found. It's by James J. Lynch. It's called The Broken Heart, The Medical Consequences of Loneliness. So just to summarize, Dr. Lynch is at the University of Maryland. He's very well known, and this book was written in 1977, and he just recently came out with an updated version, which I have that one too, but I wanted to bring out this older book here and read a couple examples of some of the things that he's found. Here it says, the Rochester Medical School research group that has included Doctors George Engel, William Green, and Arthur Schmale has been pointing out for the past 2 decades that a strong relationship exists between early parental loss and the subsequent development of various physical diseases. For example, when Schmale examined the relationship between separation and depression and the development of physical disease such as cardiovascular disease, he found that a significant number of adult patients in the hospital with physical disease had suffered the early loss of one or both parents. Confronted again as the adults with some new loss or the threat of such a loss, these patients tended to become very depressed and develop various physical diseases, including cardiac disorders. So there's one book. So in our project, we're going to be taking all of this material and putting it into some kind of a multimedia format so that we can actually, you know, help people to educate them.
So they have better health.
So they have better health, yeah. And especially I'd really...
Stay out of the hospitals.
Stay out of the hospitals. Those hospitals are incredibly expensive.
Right, yeah.
They're filled with wonderful people who are very loving, and so it's a good place to go to. But it's very expensive, and it's better to get the love at home.
That's right, yeah.
Have good health, and avoid going to the hospital.
That's right, yeah. This table.
In this whole project that I've been working on with Colonel Barber, one of the ideas that I've gotten very excited about is I'm excited about bringing all of this material to religious leaders around the country, pastors, priests, the people that run the churches, rabbis,
Yeah, right.
because Muslims, yeah. And because I'm very excited about helping them to understand how much power they actually have in the ideas that they're discussing with the people that attend their churches. My perception before I discovered Christianity has been that, for the most part, well, to some degree, pastors and priests are not really looked to as having a lot of value for people. There's some kind of a limit, let's put it that way. There's people that really know the value that's there, and so they know what's going on, but sort of maybe in the mainstream or in the scientific community, there's not a great recognition for what is the role of a pastor or priest in health, mental health, physical health. So moving on to the next book, this one is by Dr. Dean Ornish. It's called Love and Survival, The Scientific Basis for the Healing Power of Intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest books that I've found. He's very well known. He's an incredible speaker. And this book was written, I believe, in the 1990s. Here's what Dr. Ornish says. There's a good deal of suffering in our culture these days. It is very difficult to motivate people to make even simple changes in behavior, like quitting smoking, changing diet, exercising, or even taking their medications when they feel depressed, lonely, and isolated. There are many, many ways of numbing pain, killing pain, distracting, or distancing themselves from emotional pain. Some people smoke cigarettes, others overeat, abuse drugs and alcohol, channel surf, work too hard. Our culture provides us lots of ways to avoid pain temporarily. So this passage right here is critical for several reasons. Perhaps a little later we're going to be talking about addictions and the problem of alcoholism and using drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And in my research, one of the surprising things I found is that alcohol basically is a way to reduce stress for people. Alcohol is known to be a depressant.
Mm-hmm.
If you look up alcohol in any dictionary or any encyclopedia, it says alcohol is a depressant.
That's right.
That means that it reduces stress. So
But it replaces it with something worse.
it does. It replaces it with, since alcohol's, the body sort of reacts to it like it's a poison. You know, the liver immediately tries to filter out and destroy the alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and alcohol poisons the liver and kills the liver. So alcohol reduces stress temporarily. You know, that's why they call it happy hour.
In your mind.
Yeah, it reduces in your mind, but when the alcohol wears off, it actually has a rebound effect, and it creates more stress when it wears off.
That's right.
So I'm excited about bringing this material to the public so that people that are consuming a lot of alcohol and they believe that they're an alcoholic, they may just have too much stress.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people that I've talked to who are consuming a lot of alcohol have broken families.
Mm-hmm.
They have regrets and resentments. They have things that they're unhappy about, things that are causing them distress, financial problems. So if people understand this connection between alcohol and stress, we perhaps could, people who are Christian can use the Bible, people
Mm-hmm.
to use the philosophies to reduce their stress.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Now another great passage, important passage here is, and let me return for a second to Dr. Bennett's book. In my many discussions with Dr. Bennett on health, he has pointed out that the overwhelming majority of Americans, we'll work with Americans for the moment, find that they're unable to control the preventable illnesses by changing their lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
reducing stress, changing their diet, exercising. Right now we have an epidemic of obesity.
Overweight children.
Overweight
Even-
now, yeah,
and
now
adults too, yeah. Mm-hmm.
the obesity in children has actually seen a dramatic rise over the last decade.
Yeah.
And so all of the research suggests that, and this passage right here suggests that the reason why people have a hard time changing their lifestyle is because they're depressed.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now,
Right, yeah.
I've got another set of books which explains how stress leads to depression.
Mm-hmm.
So stress is sort of a very critical component in the problem of poor health, which we're focusing on today.
Yeah, we send our buses out to haul the children to school. Then we build $1 million building for them to exercise in, see,
Mm-hmm.
and play the games in and all like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, And
they'd be better off they could walk to school, see, get exercise, see.
That's true. Yeah. Yep. And that, I'm glad you interjected children, because hopefully in this presentation we'll get to talk a little bit about the school voucher program. Because all of my research leads me to conclude that the school voucher program could have a profound effect on health of families, health of children. And just to touch on that a little bit, I see the school voucher program as impacting America in several ways. First of all, if parents have the option of moving their children to smaller schools, maybe religious schools for Christians or Jewish people, they will reduce class sizes. By reducing class sizes, it will reduce the burden of teachers. Right now are pretty much overloaded with too many children and not enough people to help teach them. So by reducing class sizes, it will make the classes more manageable, more intimate. The teachers will be able to spend more time with the children. It reduces the stress. When you pack a lot of kids in a room,
that's right,
and they're all, you know, some of them, they get nervous, they get tension.
That's right, yeah.
When there's insufficient resources going to school, it raises the stress of everybody in the school.
Right.
So by reducing class sizes, we reduce stress, and that leads to better health down the line.
And our children in schools need to learn the great moral and spiritual values of life. See?
Well,